Hey guys, Youngblood with you for another episode of Exploring the Starmap, this time picking up our journey in a place with an interesting duality between the two most interesting planets. The system is Kellog. First discovered back in 2811 by a nav jumper known as Patek Cohen, he was basically thrilled to find a new location that he was hoping to really be able to set up a home in. However, those hopes came crashing down once surveys found out that there was plenty of life here already, which meant that protection under the Fair Chance Act was going to be taking place, thus following a lot of red tape surrounding that process. Now, while there was a review of this system and how that was being kicked around internally, researchers of all kinds were really getting excited to get here and kind of just do what they do. Until about 5 years later, when there were two jump points that were discovered into Vandal space, basically leading to Vector and Virgil. Now, instead of scientists, the government then sent in the Navy to find a way of setting up a early warning system. They started out with dumping proximity sensors that could be monitored, but a senator from Idris came up with a relatively unique option that would convert this destined to be pretty quiet location of space into a busy infrastructure location for the UEE. Now, Kellogg itself is a G-type yellow dwarf star with its first planet in an extremely tight orbit, which is a common theme, close enough that the surface is comprised of nothing but lava. There's actually so much heat and nowhere to land that the scans of what lies beneath that from a mineral or a resource perspective have been inconclusive, so basically consider this place of little interest. Kellogg 2, or Zis, is a different story. This is a beautiful planet that has a bunch of canyons and deep jungles and a lot of diversity and life here that is some of the deepest that we've actually found anywhere, which is the responsible party for the Fair Chance Act being in place in the system. Now, the water here is relatively warm, meaning that there's a lot of sea life, and the jungles are home to many insects and some primate species. There's two species of creatures here that are a little bit more well known, starting with the orms, who are a primitive hominid type of species, who are located mostly in the North Pole area of the planet. This species has some social interactions that were a little bit more advanced than other species discovered, as well as having the ability to use some primitive tools. The most well-known species here is the flowpets, which actually started a craze where people desperately wanted to get one. It all started when a smuggler stole some from a planet, and then ideally he had the idea of trying to give basically a small but reliable source of food, which turned out they weren't actually edible, but people were really wanting to get their hands on them as pets. Now, the government is enforcing the Fair Chance Act, and they did decide to put in a ban on these, so many ended up letting their flow pets go into the wild, basically being afraid that they would be caught, which means that around the universe you'll see some feral flow pets running around. Now, we don't know a lot about what flow pets actually are. I kind of envision them as tribbles, but we'll have to see. Now, Zis is now patrolled on the ground by the Army, and while there may be some researchers here or in space, there's a space station there called Pegasus that's in orbit, and that's basically where you're going to find the main bulk of people at this location. Pegasus is also serving as the local military base in the area. Kellogg 3 is an inhospitable planet for humans. It's got a thick atmosphere covered in smog. There are some rumors that this is a staging ground for jailbreaks from another planet here, or potentially smugglers trying to get to Zis. Basically, nobody really knows what goes on here. It sounds like it may not necessarily be corrosive to your ship, and you may be able to survive in a suit, but we'll just have to see. Kellogg 4 is a super Earth that suggests that there could be some decent resources here, and that really bums out people that work for Schumann Mining and individual contractors, because the UEE is refusing any rights to mine here based on the location's proximity to both Zis and a prison world further out in the system. Kellogg 5 is a gas dwarf with a rocky surface, which is not quite a smog planet, but it's one of the few that actually are known in space, and this location turns out to be a poor option for refueling based on its size and atmospheric composition. The last planet here is Kellogg 6, which is known as Quarterdeck, and is the aforementioned prison world in the UEE in this system. Senator Daniela Agron was the one that I mentioned before, who had the novel idea based on the scary kind of proximity to Vandal space, and the already high military presence here to turn this location into a prison world. Now, this is where we would send some of our worst criminals to maximum security lockup, far away from civilized space, always under the threat of attack from Vandal, and with plenty of oversight from the actual military. They even had the idea to turn this into a production facility for antimatter to allow for the prisoners to help pass their time, and allowing the UEE to profit as a result. The scale of the operation also means that this is the best place to get that antimatter if you need it. Now, one of the benefits to having it done here is that producing the material, or I guess anti-material, is extremely dangerous. So who better to have do the job than those already sentenced to spend their life in prison, or most of their life in prison. In fact, there's been hundreds of prisoners who've died here, likely in very horrific ways. But even that doesn't stop the volunteers or prisoners from wanting to find a way to shorten their sentences and pass the time by working in this facility. Now, the prison here is tremendously large, and while the security is impressive, there's plenty of people who have actually escaped with the assistance of their buddies on the outside. There is a space station that kind of follows Quarterdeck around, known as the Justice Star, where bounty hunters can bring prisoners and process them, as well as getting some of the highest bounty payouts based on the direct delivery of the prisoner to this location, as opposed to being dropped off somewhere else in the system where the government would just have to haul them back to this location. So you can make more at this location than, say, like ArcCorp. Kellogg has 4 jump points leading from this system, going to Odin in Cronus and UEE space, and to Virgil and Vector in Vandal space. And despite the proximity to Vandal space, there haven't really been the frequency of Vandal raiding parties one may expect, but that's probably tied to the lack of resources, or basically civilians here. So who would want to come and visit this place that has very little in the way of economy or resources under the protection of the Fair Chance Act? I think there's probably several who might actually find quite a bit of value here. First off, bounty hunters wanting to make the most profit possible should certainly come here to drop off criminals, especially if you're interested in hunting down smugglers or those that are known for prison breaks. You could potentially just do some work in this system without jumping around that much. I think there's some potential for haulers or traders who are interested in taking contracts for antimatter to make good profit, especially in protected hull ships where they're going to be a little bit more hidden away. For those that are more interested in doing like commodity trading, if you're actually able to directly purchase antimatter from the prison, I think this is probably going to be the best spot in the galaxy to get it. But even traditional hauling likely has a lot of value here too, because you've got 2 space stations that have no resources in the system being grown, so they're likely going to need fuel, food, and other items. Mercenary work could also be found here, jumping into Vandal space, or even just patrolling around the jump points looking for raiders. And finally, smugglers who don't mind hiding out in the smog at Kellogg 3 might be able to find things to do, either going out and doing things, or maybe even doing like some black market activities outside of the prying eyes zone, hidden under the smog. So that's basically it for the Kellogg system. If you guys have questions, please let me know. Otherwise, stay tuned for a lot more coming soon, and have yourselves a wonderful day. Take care.